Hello and welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. I hope everyone is doing well. Today I'm going to be reading you 4 stories from the Haunted Canada book series. If I pronounce anything wrong, I do apologize. Phantom of the Empress, Fort Macleod, Alberta. Fort Macleod is the oldest town in Alberta, about 160 kilometers south of Calgary. It's where the Northwest Mounted Police, now the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, built their first post in the province in 1874. A reconstruction of the original fort is the town's main tourist attraction. Fort Macleod is also home to the Empress Theatre, the province's longest operating live theatre since opening in 1912. The theatre has always been one of the town's main gathering places: variety shows, concerts, musicals, plays, and lectures. The Empress has hosted them all. It's also been the place to take in the latest hit movie. But every now and then the Empress Theatre plays host to an eerie performance that isn't on the list of scheduled events. It's a one-person show starring a character that theatre staff call Ed. Who Ed is remains a mystery, and what he does is very mysterious too. Those who've seen him say he's a big hairy fellow who holds his trousers up with suspenders. One show manager reported seeing him in the audience, sitting in the same place in the balcony several nights running. An actor said that Ed actually stood on the stage for a while during an evening performance, and once a customer said he bought tickets from an older, rather large man he didn't recognize, only to learn later that no men were working in the box office that particular night. Some people say that Ed must be the ghost of a janitor who worked at the theater more than 70 years ago. No one knows how the man died, but apparently he smoked and drank a lot. He also worked part-time at a local cattle auction. That could explain why smells of tobacco, alcohol, and manure linger in the air whenever the ghost makes an appearance. When it once looked as though the Empress would have to close, the sound of crying could be heard in empty dressing rooms. Perhaps the Empress's most faithful janitor couldn't bear to have the theater close. Of course, if Ed is the spirit of a long-dead janitor, he seems to have forgotten how hard it is to take care of a theater. Supposedly, he's the culprit who occasionally tosses trash onto the floor right after it's been put in the garbage can. He's also blamed for hiding things, setting things off the security alarms, slamming doors, and flipping the seats up and down. People have also reported hearing someone running in the aisles, even though they can't see anyone there. Theater managers say that Ed is a harmless ghost whose antics can be annoying at times, but wouldn't you feel more scared than annoyed if you saw coffee mugs moving around on a table when no one was touching them? And what would you think if you saw footprints forming in a sawdust-covered floor, as if some invisible person were walking across the room? Ed is said to have been responsible for both of those spooky performances. One theater patron also said that the image of a stranger suddenly appeared behind him in a mirror when he was alone in the washroom. When he described the apparition to the staff, they agreed that it sounded just like Ed, but that's the only time he's been seen in the washroom, so theater goers shouldn't be afraid to use the facilities at the Empress. Still, no one can be sure where or when Ed might show up next. Unlike other performers at the theater, Ed doesn't advertise his appearances ahead of time. Wells of Sorrow, Signal Hill, Newfoundland and Labrador. Signal Hill in St. John's is one of the Newfoundland and Labrador's best-known landmarks. Hike to the top of it and you'll be rewarded with spectacular views of the city and harbor below, the rugged coastline on either side of the narrow harbor entrance, and the seemingly endless stretch of ocean beyond it. You'll also have a chance to tour Cabot Tower, the tall castle-like museum on top of the hill. It was built in 1897 to celebrate the 400th anniversary of John Cabot's arrival in the New World. Signal Hill is also the place where on December 12, 1901, inventor Guglielmo Marconi received the first transatlantic wireless radio signal. But that's not why the steep rocky rise is called Signal Hill. From the early 1700s, flags that identified approaching ships were flown from a post on the hill to signal to the traders and dock workers below which ships would soon be sailing into the harbor. Over the centuries, Signal Hill has also played an important role in Newfoundland's defense. It was the ideal place for positioned batteries, groups of cannon that would be aimed at any invading ship that tried to enter the harbor. At different times, barracks were also built on the hill to house garrisons of soldiers and their families. Scaffolds were erected on the hill too. The shocking sight of hanged criminals dangling high above the port served as a powerful reminder of the price to be paid for crimes such as treason and murder. With such a colorful history, it shouldn't come as a surprise to learn that a ghost is said to haunt Signal Hill. What may be surprising is that the ghost is believed to be female. Many times, people have reported hearing the mournful wail of a woman. The sadness in her cry is unmistakable, but who might she be? One possible explanation is that she was the wife of a young soldier stationed at one of the barracks on the hill in the early 1840s. Those barracks were terrible places to live in the winter. Constantly battered by icy winds, they were almost impossible to keep warm. In an 1842 report, Governor John Harvey referred to the extreme sufferings endured by the barracks soldiers and their families. He described how the chimneys couldn't draw smoke up out of the fireplace, leaving people with two choices: put out the fires or open the windows to vent the smoke-filled rooms. Either way, the barracks were left bone-chilly cold. Things got so bad that more than a dozen frostbitten Royal Artillery soldiers had to be hospitalized. Worse still, a young mother who had tried to sit up all night holding her baby to keep it warm woke up the next morning to find it dead in her arms. Harvey was horrified when he found out about the infant's tragic death. He ordered the barracks closed immediately and moved the company down the hill to warmer quarters. Some say it's the dead baby's mother whose wails have been heard on Signal Hill, but perhaps the heartbroken spirits of other women have also lingered high above the harbor. Many wives and girlfriends used to climb the hill each morning to gaze out at the steely gray Atlantic, hoping for a glimpse of an overdue ship or boat. Often those women waited in vain. Their wails, the cries of women from long ago whose men were lost at sea, may still blow across the rocky crest of Signal Hill. A soldier for all eternity, Niagara on the Lake, Ontario. Swayze's cellar, the sign on the wooden plank door says it all. The cellar of the old Angel Inn in Niagara on the Lake is Captain Colin Swayze's hangout. The inn's owners don't know when he returned to the basement, but they accept the fact that he has. They even humor him by flying a British Union Jack flag outside. Of course, the cellar isn't the most comfortable spot to hang out. Guests have commented how cold it can get down there, but the captain doesn't seem to mind the unusually chilly drafts. He may even be causing them. After all, Swayze has been dead for nearly 200 years. A British soldier, Swayze fought in Canada against the Americans during the War of 1812. When American invaders showed up at the inn in 1813, Swayze hid in a rum barrel in the cellar. One version of his death has him being killed during a hand-to-hand fight when the enemy fought him. Another version was Americans stabbing him with their bayonets as he crouched in the barrel. Not long afterward, American forces burned down the inn, and it wasn't rebuilt and expanded until the 1820s. Back then, it offered travelers good food, cozy rooms, and friendly service, and still does. But over the years, it has also offered former and current owners and guests some very strange experiences. Several years ago, a man in a red coat made some sudden appearances and disappearances in the women's washroom in front of two startled cleaning ladies. They seem to be the only ones who've actually seen the ghostly figure of an army officer from the past. But Florence Ledoux, a former owner who also lived at the inn as a child, once saw three saucers float through the air, one behind the other, before crashing to the floor several meters away. Her head waiter, Bruce Cartwright, was nearly hit in the head when a metal beer mug was whipped across the lounge by some invisible hand. And then there were the footsteps, eerie and plodding, when no one else is around. People have been hearing the footsteps late at night for as long as anyone can remember. There have also been reports of dishes rattling in a cupboard, chairs moving across the floor, and the sound of a man's laughter coming from the empty dining room. Occasionally, a guest has heard fife and drum marching music coming from a second-floor bedroom. No one's been able to discover who or what is playing it, but it is sort of music Captain Swayze and his men would have bravely marched to nearly 200 years ago. Swayze's death may have stopped him from fighting in the war, but it seems that he will never surrender to death. The Dead Lights, St. Louis, Saskatchewan. St. Louis, Saskatchewan is a small town with a big story to tell. Located about 40 kilometers south of Prince Albert, it's the place to go if you want to hear about and maybe even see the St. Louis Light. The ghostly light has been appearing just north of St. Louis for more than 80 years. It shows up often enough that some locals take house guests out for a midnight drive just to get a glimpse of it. The light rarely lets them down. Young people go out to wait for it too, just for the fun of it. Sometimes, though, seeing it can be more frightening than funny. Saskatoon resident Sergey and Gail Garou thought it would be entertaining to take friends visiting from Alberta to see the famous light. They arrived in St. Louis about an hour before midnight and parked outside the town beside the old railway tracks that hadn't been used for years. There was a chill in the air, so they stayed in the car, chatting and waiting. After about an hour, they were ready to head back to Saskatoon. Then it happened. First, the light appeared as a small white circle, but then it grew a little larger and brighter, and it seemed to get closer and closer beneath the white light with a smaller red one. Amazed, the four friends stayed in the car and watched the lights for more than an hour. It still seemed as though the beams were getting closer, but they never actually did. So Sergey and his buddy decided to go toward them and check them out. They started the car and edged out a bumpy dirt road that ran behind the old rail line. After they'd been driving for a few minutes, the light suddenly went out. But just as a few seconds later, an eerie glow filled the car. All four turned around and to their horror saw that the light was now behind them, and it was much too close for comfort. Amid shrieks and shouts to get out of there, Garou sped back toward the main road at top speed. As they drove away, they could see that the light was gone again. Documentary filmmakers, a university professor, and even a mayor of St. Louis, Emile Lucier, have all gone on record as having seen the light. Distant headlights have been offered as one explanation for its fairly regular appearance, but Lucier and experts investigated and rejected that possibility. Besides, people were seeing the light as far back as the 1920s, when hardly anyone in the area owned a car. But trains were still running past St. Louis then, and some locals recall a story about a tragic accident on the tracks near their town. Details are vague, but the story has a worker carrying a lantern as he walked along the tracks, checking for loose rails. The unfortunate man was struck by a locomotive, and the blow was so powerful that it ripped off his head. The train tracks were pulled up years ago, but some people believe that horrifying death scene is still being played out every time the light appears. The white light is the headlight of the engine that hit the man, and the smaller red light is the lantern he was holding when it sent him to his death. Thank you for listening. If you like this type of content, please consider subscribing and liking my channel, and I will see you on the next one.